Well, it's a pleasure to welcome Casey and Meygan to the show. You guys are part of Marriage 365, which I've known about for a while. A great mission going, and as we were just talking in the pre-show, it'll be a fun conversation just because we're basically involved in the same war, but we kind of have different fronts.
We do.
In the way we're attacking what goes on and trying to be of service and help. And so, welcome to the show. So glad to see you guys here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.
And so I'm curious with what you guys are doing in your whole mission and how you are interwoven into lots of people's lives. What are some of the things as far as the lay of the land in marriage world that you guys keep coming up against and seeing that's happening?
Oh, that's a good question. I would say, I think what we're seeing is really the last couple of years is this desire to want a healthy marriage. I don't think anyone gets married wanting to get a divorce, right? I mean,
Sure.
they didn't expect, we're going to be this out of love. We're living more like roommates than best friends and lovers, right? And so I think what we've recognized is that people only know what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And then they move through life. They're winging it. They're winging it, and they're hoping, and they're using hope as a strategy in their marriage. And then the pain becomes so bad where then they reach out, or the algorithm gods of Instagram, serve them a quote or a reel or something. And they're like, oh, dude, like I identify with that.
Yeah.
And maybe we're not as happy as we should. And so I think what I've seen is rarely is it intentional. It's the unintentional choices that people are making. It's the put your head down, do the work, do the kids, the chores, just keep going. And then at some point people go, wow, I don't think we really had a plan. I don't think we really knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would say along that line, people don't have a healthy mindset about what it takes to be married. I don't think they really count the cost of what it means to be married. They love the idea of having a happily ever after. They love the idea like, let's have this beautiful wedding and we're going to raise a family. And then once they get into it, the courage to choose what is right over what is easy, the grit that it takes, even some of the sacrifice that's required, it's just too much for them. And so a lot of couples, what I feel like we're seeing is they kind of quit, but they stay. So they stop. And so there is this like borderline, like, are we in a place of like where there's the abuse of neglect? Because we're just actually not even paying attention to each other's emotional needs. So we're really good co-parents or roommates, but we have nothing beyond that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of loneliness.
Which then becomes the ticking time bomb, right? Because those kids that have kept us together are going to leave. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Yep. I mean, that's a trend that shifted too.
Right. Great divorce, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so now all of a sudden I'm forced to have to, I'm having to face this person that I've done a lot of life, quote unquote, with, but I've never actually been intertwined as much as I've idealized I would be prior, like you're describing, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think that's that element of we all buy into the Hollywoodization and the Hallmarkization of relationships, and even an Instagramization of relationships.
Yep.
Well, we see all the highlights. We see the great pictures of people and the romantic travel couple go, I'd love to go to Italy, or I would love to do all these things. And I think the reality is that we've all been raised on this diet of an hour and a half rom-com where the couple sets out on a journey, they meet a challenge, and by the end of the story, they all lived happily ever after. Mm-hmm. But they never show like the really non-sexy conversations about how do we set up healthy boundaries around these in-laws or boundaries with the way we spend our money. They don't show that. And so we kind of walk into love with this anticipation, expectation that like, well, it's just all going to solve itself. I mean, that's what I've seen stories of, right?
We'll figure it out. Time will heal. We're just in a season. And I think like it's what I heard someone say this to me. It was my marriage mentor many years ago. It was like people put a pause on their relationship. Like, well, it's just a season, like a mental pause of like, well, the kids are young. Well, then the kids become like, we're in the teenage years, right? It's like, well, the kids are just teenagers. Well, we're almost done, right? You can't keep doing that. You can't keep putting your marriage and your relationship on pause it won't sustain. It's not sustainable. And so I think that's definitely something that we would say is the mass majority of people that we see. Is it wasn't like they woke up and they were intentionally mean and, you know, everyone's a narcissist. Like we hear these things that are thrown out and it's like, no, really, it's two people who genuinely got married and they loved each other and they want their happily ever after, but they did not have a plan.
Right. They don't know how to find that.
They don't know how to find it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think what you're describing is how do we get better at as a society and as people in some ways of realizing marriage in name only doesn't actually satisfy what we're maybe all longing for.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, it can maybe create a more comfortable life, but a more comfortable life isn't actually, in my opinion, a better one.
For sure. Well, look at the stars. They have all the money, power, influence, fame, and they're not super happy. A lot of them.
Right.
I mean, right? We hear the suicide attempts. We see the multiple divorces. We see the hidden lives. Right? Like it's evident that doesn't value happiness, because if it did, they'd all be great people and living an amazing life. You know.
But I think you touched on something interesting, because you said we look to marriage to make us happy. I think we actually have, in large part, lost our ability to make ourselves happy.
Yeah.
Because we've replaced that tough road with cheap thrills, whether that's porn, dopa hits through social media,
well, even like a booming career, like the society won't tell you that that's bad, but then things like COVID happen and you could lose your career in one night. And if your identity and your happiness and your joy was in your career, well, what are you going to do after that?
But we've shortchanged the journey for all these other things. We haven't done the heart work. So therefore we get married and we're both like craving each other's attention. And I think our story was that, you know, I expected Meygan to make me happy.
Yeah, he did.
And when she didn't, all I did was rage.
Yeah.
I just got angry. And for some people, they lash out. Some people, they go inside. And there starts the journey.
Yeah.
I mean, that's that dynamic of I'm looking to somebody else for something I need to find in myself first, and then the other person becomes the rounded out part of this conversation, or the overflow. I mean, in the South, we refer to that as two ticks with no dog.
Yep.
We get involved with, and it's like we're just sucking each other dry, and I don't want you to latch on to me, and so I'm just reacting rather than wait, why did it become so hard? Because that's what I keep seeing too, is, and even on a deeper clinical level, I keep seeing client after client talking about this idea of, why can't my spouse be this?
Yep.
Rather than learning to face who your spouse actually is and who you are in the midst of that dynamic. Because we've talked about this on Sexy Marriage Radio several times throughout the years I love the idea. I still have no idea who to attribute this quote to. I've kept trying to find the where it comes from, but there's a quote I came across years ago in grad school that talked about the morning you wake up and wonder if you made a mistake or something's not right. That's when marriage really begins.
Oh, that's good.
Because it's a deeper something that's not about happiness at all. There's a deeper, meaningful thing going on here, which I think that's kind of what you guys are tapping into with a roadmap of, this isn't about happily ever after. This is about creating something meaningful for you and your spouse.
Correct. Well, it's interesting. We were just at a marriage retreat where we got to attend. Typically we host them, and it was so amazing. And they had a speaker from Harvard, and she was talking about how Harvard's been doing a longitude test for, I don't even know how many years, 80 years or something like that. You probably have heard of this, but if not, it's really interesting, because she said it's called the Happiness Project. We want to know, right, what it takes to get people happy and thriving. Everyone wants to know the secret. I just want my kids to be happy. I just want to be happy. I want my spouse. I want the people in my life to be happy. We hear it everywhere.
Yep.
And what did their study find? That it's about our relationships and connections with people that we know.
Yep.
It's not your money. It's not your career. So you can work for these things. You can say, well, my spouse is supposed to make me happy. But at the end of the day, it's actually the connection that you share in your relationship with your spouse, and of course with others.
Are you saying that I can have a Lamborghini in the driveway and still be a little upset.
Bingo.
You're crushing my dreams right now.
Yeah. Well, we could ride the Lamborghini together and hold hands. Well, you can't really hold hands.
That would make me happy.
Yes, that would make us happy. If we're connecting and we're talking and we're having great conversations in the Lamborghini, then that works.
You're not talking in a Lambo.
Just for that moment though, but because eventually you got to park the thing and get out, and then you're worrying about what's going to happen with it, and someone going to ding it, and
yes, exactly. Yeah, on our deathbed, it's true. If you think about it, no one wants to die alone. That's almost like, I would say, like a top fear of a lot of people. You want to be surrounded by the people that you've invested in and the people who've invested in you, and they're going to miss you, and they're going to talk about you once you die and go, oh, Corey, he was this and he was that, and that's what we all want deep down inside of us.
Yeah, because that's the one thing, is this illusion of here in America of the happiness syndrome. Of it's even it's built into the structure, the foundation of, and the pursuit of happiness. But what does that even mean? That's such a fleeting, ill-defined illusion that's out there, rather than I love. And so I think this is kind of built on their work that they started with, the idea of happiness comes along when you're doing something else that's meaningful. I mean, that's also the idea of joy comes along when you're doing something that's important.
Correct.
And I will say, so some of our private clients are very high net worth individuals, and we work with them and really dig deep into their value systems. And, they're usually coming to us with broken relationships. And it's, I mean, every single one of them, they typically look at me and they're like, Casey, I can buy anything I want. I can have anything I want in this world, but I have nothing. Right. Because my relationship's broken. And you can see, they have worked so hard to build an empire to themselves, whether it be sports, being a celebrity, whatever it is.
CEO,
being well-known, being famous. And because of their relationship with their spouse being broken, you can tell they're like, I would trade it in right now.
Oh, yeah.
In a heartbeat. It would mean nothing to me if I could just restore that relationship. That's how powerful it is. I love Jim Carrey's quote. He's like, I wish everybody was famous for a day so they could realize how passing and fleeting it is.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, and that also brings to mind Jimmy Carson's old quote about the only benefit of being rich is you don't have to worry about where your next meal's coming from.
That's the only benefit.
That's the only benefit of it.
Yep.
Because there's still all kinds of pain and longing and hurt and frustration that comes along behind the scenes. And that's what I think we're all trying to figure out, because marriage, in my opinion, exposes that in me.
Absolutely.
My spouse is going to see it. I cannot hide who I am in a relationship.
I want to add to this, because I think it's really interesting. You had mentioned someone comes into your office and they're like, well, if only my spouse did X, Y, Z. And it's really this thing of entitlement. And I think that for us, that was our turning point, where I believed that Casey was the problem. He believed I was the problem. And it wasn't until my amazing therapist said, if you want to make a better marriage, it starts by making a better you. I believe that if when you turn your mindset around, I only have control over myself. I have zero control over what comes out of his mouth, the habits he makes. Now, I don't have to tolerate certain behaviors, right? Those are boundaries. But I literally can tell him, well, I can't have you talk to me that way. Well, he could still talk to me that way. I mean, I can't open his mouth and speak for him, right? And so I think that is such a turning point when people listening can understand, if you can take the focus off actually your spouse and what they're doing and just work on your own stuff, because we all have it, right? We're all broken. We all have our own growth areas, our areas where we know, whether we're admitting them or not out loud, that we're like, yeah, we could work on that. If you just focused on that, it's pretty cool, because you don't really have as much time to focus on your spouse. And I think that that's what I would see with the social media world, is this focus of your spouse is the problem. Oh, your spouse must be a narcissist. And then when you get to label I'm sure you've heard that all the time. And then what happens, and what we tell people is, if you say your spouse is a narcissist, then you have zero responsibility
Yep.
in the relationship. Everything is their fault.
Yeah.
You don't look anything in and it's like an excuse, like a free pass to go, well, that's why your marriage is crappy, because your spouse is a narcissist, or they're bipolar, or they're all the different things that oh my gosh, there's so many different terms out there that are mislabeled, thrown around. And then you go home and you say, well, I was listening to this thing on Instagram and I think that you're a narcissist. Now you're labeling your spouse. And then your spouse feels totally accused. All that to say, I believe that we are looking, yes, to other people to make us happy. And I believe that it's a lot easier to blame our spouse. I'm sure they do have things that they need to work on. But we live in a world where we love to blame, point, and shift the focus off of us. And it doesn't work in marriage. It just doesn't.
No, and that's why I've landed on this idea with the phrase of, what is my spouse up against when they have to deal with me? That I think that's a good exposing question for me to be asking. I mean, I've also used this for years of, would I want to be married to me?
Yeah.
And there's aspects of yeah, and then there's aspects of no.
Yeah. That's good. That's really good. It's a good self-reflection.
Well, I think that's the whole point of relationships. I mean, that's what you're describing is you guys, in the way I hear your front lines, is you're giving people resource that allows them to confront what needs to be confronted, which largely is going to wind up being, what's my culpability in this whole equation, not just them. Because it's not like a spouse gets off free with this thing either, right? Because this is the thing that the spiteful me, in the way I think, and I know I have this worst side of me that's spiteful. When I start handling myself better, there is a part of me that is really pleased that Pam's going to have to up her game.
I love that.
That's the negative. That doesn't feel real great, but it is. I'll acknowledge that it's there.
It's there, yes.
But it's that motivation of, okay, wait, that's just such a more empowered stance to face what I need to face.
Yeah.
That I changed the dynamic then. I mean, that's like, what's the phrase? If I want to change the dance steps with my spouse, I change my steps.
Yeah. Well, there's something definitely self-confrontational about marriage. I love the quote. I can't remember who said it, but true nobility is not being better than my fellow man, but by being better than my former man.
Yeah.
And that there is this idea that we are constantly working on ourselves and improving ourselves, and marriage provides kind of the opportunities to test out how have we improved. Now, of course, if you're in the mindset that you're going to make me happy, then I'm just sitting on coast. I'm just on cruise control. Yeah. But if I have to go through the inner journey of making myself happy, then I get to share that joy, peace, happiness, whatever we're finger quotes calling happiness, with Meygan. And that's the gift that I bring to her. But that means I have to go through that work. And that's why that whole concept behind, if you want to make a better marriage, make a better you. Like, that is a tagline that we really, camp out on, because it's about self-mastery. It's empowering, because I can work on my marriage actually by myself, which is kind of weird, because when you think about all the tools out there for couples, it are like resources. It seems like it's about the couple working on the marriage together.
Right.
And I would say when we focus on our content, we're actually thinking someone's watching this by themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what can we say to that spouse? Rarely do we ever see two people showing up at the same time.
Yeah.
We're ready to work on their marriage. In fact, all the message we get from our DMs are constantly like, I'm doing this by myself. I'm doing this by myself. Yeah. And I would say, if there's a billboard that I could put out into the world, it would be, can we change this shift of like, my spouse won't work on the marriage, therefore I'm stuck, therefore I'm hopeless. I would like to say, let's turn that around. Marriage is about working on yourself. So you are empowered, and you do have hope, because then you can set the example. You can set the standard. This is the way we're going to treat each other in a relationship.
No, I think that's brilliant, because it fits so well in the idea of I use the similar terminology in the sense that people come in and say, we need to work on our marriage, rather than, no, your marriage is working on you more than you ever could on
Yeah.
it.
I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
And when you see it that way, now all of a sudden, maybe I have a little extra courage to lean into what I need to do for me and make a better me. And then the tagline I use with that is, regardless if your spouse gets on board with this or not, you at least created a better you. You get the benefit of that. And those you care about get the benefit of that.
Correct.
You see if they have good judgment to want to be a part of that.
Yep. Yeah.
That's so good.
And that is, by the way, that is our story. So that's why we're very passionate about that. Casey refused to go to therapy with me. I mean, refused. He was raised in a home where, I mean, your parents never went to therapy, if I'm correct.
Yeah, a very conservative Christian perspective where, you know, humanistic ideas are not needed. So don't ever go to a therapist because they must be anti-God.
Which I was also raised in a Christian home, and it was like, hey, if you need help, raise your hand. And there's people out there that are going to love you, listen to you,
and
support
godly
you.
people that want to help you.
And amazing. And I saw, I mean, though my parents got divorced, I did see them go to therapy and try. And then when after the divorce, I was in junior high, unfortunately, when it happened, I started acting out. And my parents were like, hey, we want you to go see a therapist. And so I love, praise God, from an early age, to me, that was what you did when you got stuck emotionally. And so here we are, we're 3 years into our marriage, we're stuck. I mean, not only are we stuck, I hate this guy. Like, not only do I like not love him, I'm like, I kind of just don't want him in my life. And he wouldn't divorce me. And so I knew it was going to be on me because it was this pride thing and this like, well, you know, I'm not going to be the one to lead it.
I got that in my back pocket, so at least I'm not that guy.
So I was going to be the bad. So as I'm searching divorce lawyers, my best friend says, listen, this is a massive decision. Like, you need to go talk to somebody. And sure enough, I was like, you're right. I do need to go talk to somebody. So sat down with this amazing therapist. And that's when she said, you know, you're in front of me on this couch. He's not. I can work with you. I can help guide you. I can show you how to bring defenses down. I can give you all these techniques. We can work on forgiving some things that you brought into your marriage that you didn't even realize you brought into your marriage. Like, and it was amazing. And she says, no matter what happens in your marriage, you will be healthy. You will be thriving. You won't be stuck in this. And that was that message of empowerment that I needed. So for 13 months, Corey, 13 months, it felt like 13 years. I worked on our marriage by myself. And I remember one of my homework assignments was just one of my first ones was like to get curious about Casey. Like, you used to know this guy. You obviously feel like you don't know him, because she asked me a lot of questions about him. Like, why do you think he's angry? And why? And my answer to everything was, I don't know. He's just a bad guy. That was kind of my blanket statement for everything. And she says, it sounds like you need to get curious and you need to just like do some homework and journal and ask questions. And that really was my first assignment, which then opened the door to so many other things. And she taught me, you know, go apologize for something that you know you've done wrong. Swallow your pride. And I remember the first time he had told me I was controlling, and I was, but I didn't want to admit it. And I went to him and I said, hey, I just want to tell you, you've been telling me I've been controlling, and you're right.
And I like flipped out. I was who is this person that came to me? You know, we would get into our arguments and she would like, we're good sparring partners because we're both very competitive, very stubborn. We're both leaders. We both got a lot of pride and ego. Yeah. So when we go into knockdown, drag out fights, I mean, we'll go to round 12.
I'm gonna win.
We're not going out in the first round.
I'm gonna win no matter what it takes.
So
right?
I remember the first time my face was red. I'm fuming, stomping into the room. I'm ready to, you know, lay it into her. And she saw me and she stood up and she said, hey, you know what? I really want to hear what you have to say, but it seems like right now might not be a best time for us to talk. Why don't you go outside, take a walk, cool down, come back inside and let's talk. Cause I really do want to hear what you have to say. And I was like, what?
I
was like, who is this person?
Right. This is not the way we fight. Come on, lady. Where are you?
I stopped that toxic fight cycle. And that I learned that. Yeah. And then when I saw him respond that way, like it worked, I'm like, oh, I'm onto something here, you know, because I realized I don't have to engage in an unhealthy way anymore. I can teach him how to treat me.
Yeah. So she set the standard that by which I was going to interact with her. And then she set that boundary, which I know was a hard thing to do. I mean, that's hard to say. no, I'm not going to allow you to speak to me like that. And I will remove myself from that situation,
Yep.
which is a natural consequence.
And that's something, just to interrupt you real quick, that's something that's incredibly difficult to do without trying to take a moral high ground too, because that's the worst in us. I can do this of like, oh, no, hold on. And then I'm coming across as I'm the professional here, Pam. So get it in check here. Rather than, no, this isn't just the way I want to go, but it's still kind of an equal among us.
But I will tell you, the reason why Meygan could do that was because she did the work for herself.
Right.
She didn't do it so that she could stand up to me.
Right.
So she was standing in her own confidence, not some...
Yeah, because she stood up to herself. So now she can just stand up.
Exactly. So that's why it truly is, you have to do it for yourself first. Otherwise, you will not stand when your partner comes against you with toxic behavior. But I was like, I want to be like that. I don't want to be the unhealthy spouse. The competitive nature was like, well, I'm going to out-help you. I'm going to be better than you. So
I was like, go for it, buddy.
It became like this like race of like, well, who's going to be the unhealthy spouse? Not me.
Yeah. Yep. So we're passionate about it because we lived it in our own marriage and we saw the power behind it. And obviously, it took 3 years to destroy our marriage. And we always tell people it did not happen overnight. This is not a quick fix, right? Nothing that matters in life is a quick fix. But I think it took us about 4 or 5 years to really repair, but it was worth it. It was 100% worth it, because now we've been married 21 years. We actually love and like each other. And now that we know how to maintain it, we don't have those big knockout fights anymore. I mean, every once in a while we get in a tiff, but we have the skill sets that we've learned, that I know you teach as well, that shift and can redirect from plummeting to a really nasty argument.
Right.
Or moving our conflict into like combat.
Using
that was the big shift.
I mean, we are more different than alike, and we've learned that we are going to disagree and get into arguments. But as the Gottmans say, I mean, 69% of conflict is inevitable. I think having that mindset too of we are going to go about things differently.
Right.
It's okay to have conflict, because this guy, I love him to death, but he's an avoider. And so conflict to him was bad.
Sorry. I was hung up on 69%.
I see what you did there.
I just flipped it a little bit. I was like,
slipping it in there.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think that like conflict was so bad for him, and learning it's normal. It's going to happen.
Right.
You can overcome it.
Well, and that's also the idea of when this is the power of when you can really drill into, I am the one that needs to be monitoring me more and more. I mean, we are part of the ministry at our church with Reengage, and they use the same philosophy of draw a circle around yourself and fix everything inside that circle for a better marriage. Yeah. And what that sets up to me then becomes what I have as a definition of a great marriage is it's two people that can recover well. Because we're still going to tick each other off, disappoint each other, fight intentionally, sometimes even, but we can recover. Yeah. And it doesn't take then, because that's the thing I love. The success stories become, I was way out of control and it would take weeks before we reconnected. Now it got way out of control. And by the end of the day, we had reconnected. And then it became by an hour. We had figured out how to reconnect. We weren't great yet, but we could still connect.
Yes. And an hour sounds way better than weeks, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yes. Because that's what life is really on life terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's so interesting you talked about tools, because I think that's another trend I just wanted to highlight is we get a lot of direct messages from people that have spent thousands of dollars going to couples therapy. Which really, when we start to dig deep, is just kind of talk therapy, just validation. Like, how did that make you feel? That's terrible. So what do you think you should do next? And there's an assumption like innate in all of us. We know actually how to handle relationships in the modern era, which is not true, especially for me. I mean, like my mom's been married 6 times. So I came out of chaos, and there was no way anybody I was ever going to go, oh yeah, I know exactly what healthy relationship behavior looks like.
By the way, side note, between both sets of our parents, there's 12 marriages. 12 marriages.
Yeah.
So we come from blended family, divorce, affairs, the whole thing.
Yep.
That's all we knew growing up. So
Gotcha.
that wasn't fun either.
So I think one of the things that we really, really are leaning into is this idea that couples don't need more therapy like that.
No.
No talk therapy.
Yeah. They need better tools, right? They need these constructs. Because if I knew how to do a real apology that validated, that took responsibility for my actions, accountability, but that also asked for like reconciliation and how do I rebuild trust with you? If I had that kind of tool early on in my marriage, we would have avoided so much.
Yeah.
Instead, I just sat there and going, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
She's like, I don't think you're sorry because you're not changing.
I think, I mean, obviously, as you are a therapist, I think, and you sit in that seat, it's like I tell people, there's good doctors and there's bad doctors. There's great teachers who love their job, and there's bad teachers. And I say that's the same thing with therapy, right? Is that we want to find a therapist like you or resources like we have where we aren't just going to sit there and talk about feelings. And I think that's why so many men and husbands don't want to go, because I think that's their assumption. Even with Marriage 365, we're just going to sit and talk about feelings. And I don't really want to do that.
No.
And I'm actually a female who's more of a fixer. I know men typically are, but in our relationship, I'm the fixer. I'm like, tell me what I need to do. I want to fix this and I want to move forward. And so I think, like, you know, obviously my therapist that I worked with when we were healing our marriage was amazing. Our therapist that we go to, she's amazing because she's teaching us tools. Right. And so I always tell people, you had a bad experience with therapy. A good therapist would say, how can I make this a win for you guys, and teach you tools? And whether you get tools from, you know, your church's marriage ministry, or it's a book you read,
or a
podcast you listen to, or Marriage 365, we don't care where you go.
Right.
Just make sure that you're getting results or you're seeing progress. Because I think that if you think about how many times people have been to therapy because that's what they were told to do, and they go 3, 4, 5 years. And again, these are the stories that we get, is we've done the therapy thing. We've spent 10,000 and we're still at square one. And I'm like, well, then you weren't with the right person, or something. There was some dynamic that was weird there, and let's start fresh. And so I would want anyone listening to know that there's hope. There's hope. Cause that right? Like, there's so much hope out there. Most marriage problems are fixable. Well, and that right there is like, people need to hear that, because when you're in it, I remember thinking, I had no hope. There is no way my marriage can turn around. We are doomed for divorce. And looking at our parents, the 12 different marriages, and them thinking, I'm just married the wrong person. I need to go find the quote unquote right person, obviously isn't working for them. What do you think, Corey? 6 marriages?
Well,
at some point, right? You got to be like, comes to
my mind is one of my very first clients actually was an old lady. She was on her 4th relationship. Actually, it had just ended. Oh. And so she was coming to me on help me no longer pick bad men.
Wow.
And this is in the first session. So, and I finally get it where she's kind of clearly asking that. And I just said, hold on a second. How about let's talk about the common denominator in this whole equation? That would be you, ma'am. And she did not like me at first. Oh. But then we kept talking, and she kept coming. And then she was like, I do like you, actually, because you didn't let me dance around. And, you know, I'm like, exactly. That's the whole point of this thing. Is when you can look at you differently in your own culpability. Or the phrase of what's my wife up against when she has to deal with me, right? If I keep that in my framework, I have a better likelihood of creating and surviving and solving a lot of the issues that are in front of me.
Absolutely.
So we've been hitting around at what you guys do, but so give how people can find you with Marriage 365 and a little bit about what it is that's your mission.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously probably the best way for people to find us is to go to Instagram, Marriage 365. That's a great place. We got a thriving community there. But, you know, we've created a lot of resources for couples to access these tools, such as, you know, books, retreats, but probably our most popular is one of our mobile app, where we actually have content geared towards healthy mindsets. And then what am I supposed to do next? I think that's what a lot of people ask is, what am I supposed to do in this situation So we kind of walk through constructs like, how do you set healthy boundaries? How do you do a proper apology? How do you walk through a process of forgiveness? How do I know if I'm in resentment? A lot of sex topics as well. But I will tell you, probably one of the best tools that I'm so excited about talking about is we have come out with a book called 365 Connecting Questions for Couples. And this is really a tool that unlocks conversations within a relationship. I think when we're dating each other, we're asking really good questions. We're curious. We're like, there's this mystery of like, who is this person? I wanted to get to know them better. And so that kind of gives us the energy to ask great questions that unlock all these things that we get to know about somebody. But then as we get married, we've been married 22 years.
Close, 21.
21. Okay, close to it. Well, we've known each other for 23 years.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, if I stopped getting curious about who Meygan was, I would have known Meygan as this 20-year-old. But now we're further down the road. Our views have changed. Our values have changed. Who we are, our perspectives have changed. And it's this really a desire that we need to keep getting curious with each other, no matter how far. Right. So that's when we came up with this book. It's actually, we're super excited because Penguin Random House, we self-published this book about 5 years ago, sold 100,000 copies. And then Penguin Random House really saw the vision behind this book as a tool for any relationship, dating, engaged, or married. And they're like, we like that.
You just open it up and ask a question a day. I think a lot of couples don't know what to ask.
Yeah.
And we've got a variety of fun, deep. We've got a mental health section, faith and spirituality, boundaries within family, childhood. And it really hopefully will spark a lot of emotional intimacy and connection and fun and laughter, which we need to be playful in our marriage too.
Ooh, fun.
Absolutely.
I like fun. I'm in for the fun.
Yeah, he sure is.
Well, guys, this has been so helpful just to have the conversation, have you guys join me, and then not even to mention what it is you guys do is so important and so impactful. So somebody else in the marriage line, thank you so much for what you guys do.
You're welcome. And I love what you said. We're fighting the same battle, but on different fronts. That was really good.
That's so good. So thanks a lot, guys.
Thank you.